morning, Rochester University. Thank you all so much for being tuned in today to our Tuesday chapel. As always, your engagement with us in this space is appreciated. I want to encourage you to like, share, comment, whether you're watching live or you're going to be tuned in later. Make sure you share this presentation. We've got a dynamic speaker today, and I believe you're going to be truly enriched by this presentation. The next voice that you're going to hear is our special guest, Dr. Wilson Okello. He is a poet who believes in the power of creative expression as a method to generate critical self-reflection, inspire confidence, and achieve agency. Dr. Okello is an assistant professor in the Watson College of Education at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. Bridging the artist-scholar divide, Dr. Okello draws on Black feminist theories to think about the relationship between history, the body, epistemology, anti-Blackness in education, critical masculinities, and the anti-deficit curriculum and pedagogy. He has presented several keynote addresses. He's a two-time TED Talk speaker. He has delivered over 100 keynotes, lectures, and presentations. Dr. Okello earned his Ph.D. from Miami University. His master's degree is from the University of Rhode Island, and he holds a bachelor's degree from Youngstown State University. He is the recipient of the University of Rhode Island's Distinguished Alumni Rising Star Award and the National Association of Student Personnel Administrators Outstanding Professional Award and Youngstown State University's Outstanding Alumni Award. Dr. Okello is also a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi Incorporated. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a brother, he's a tremendous presenter. We're going to be blessed from him today. So give your attention to this next voice that is joining our community in chapel. Thank you all.
Lift up your eyes upon the day breaking before you give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it into the palms of your hands, mold it into the shape of your most private need, sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for new beginnings. Do not be wedded forever to fear or yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering us space to place new steps of change here on the pulse of this new day. May you have the courage to look up and out and upon the rock, the river, the tree, your country here on the pulse of this fine day. May you have the grace to look into your sister's eyes, to look upon your brother's face and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. To you all, I bid you good afternoon or good evening whenever you might have the opportunity to observe this. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to join you. My name is Dr. Wilson Okello. I bring you greetings from North Carolina, and I'm excited to be here. As the Mbutu proverb reminds us, I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. I am in this moment because of individuals who prayed for me, who gave of themselves for me, who believed in me when I didn't have the language to believe in myself. I thank you, Director Evan Green, for this invitation, and really to the entire Rochester University community. I appreciate your time, and I honor you all on today. There's something happening in this moment. There's something happening in our world. And you know, if I were standing at the beginning of time with the possibility of taking a kind of panoramic view of the whole of human history, and the Almighty said to me, Wilson Okello, which age would you like to live in? I would take this mental flight by 1761. And I would greet and observe the first Black woman published in the Americas, Phyllis Wheatley. Yeah. I would observe as a woman who was stolen from her homeland, sold into slavery, how she transformed a language that was given, forced to her, into the miracle that we now understand as Black poetry. And despite really of her magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would move on to 1831, and I would meet the first woman to speak in public on political issues, Maria Stuart. I would watch as she took notes and called on women to possess the spirit of self-definition. She would say that it is useless for us to sit any longer with our hands folded, for that will never elevate us. She exhorted that women ought to possess the spirit of independence, bold, enterprising, fearless, and undaunted. And in the midst of all of her brilliance, I wouldn't stop there. And I would go on to meet Moses. No, not the brother with the sandy beard. I'm talking about the great conductor, Harriet Tubman. And I would watch as she went back and forth into Egypt time and time again to deliver her people to promised lands, but I wouldn't stop there. I would come up to the day of Ida B. Wells Barnett, and I would read her pamphlets, The Red Record and the Southern Hordes, as she engaged the anti-lynching campaign in the post-bellum South. I would marvel at her prophetic fire, but I wouldn't stop there. I would go on to the 1920s, and I would watch the birth of a woman named Geraldine Lacey. I would watch as she raised 9 children in Jim Crow America, whose grandchildren would go on to run departments, to become lawyers, politicians, and the very doctor who's standing before you in this moment. But I wouldn't stop there. I would go up to 1957, and I would watch as Elizabeth Eckford and her peers crossed red seas of vitriol on their way to integrating Central High School. But I wouldn't stop there. I would go up to August 28th, 1963. It's a familiar day for many folks who are interested in movements for justice. It is a day really that pierces our consciousness as the launching pad for one of the most revered speeches in the politics of Black freedom movements. It's well known, I'm sure you're aware of it, the March on Washington, where over 200,000 people gathered on the National Mall. They were organized for jobs and for freedom. They would forever be stamped as witnesses in history to the melodic tones and the audacious instantiation that said, I have a dream. We could pause really right there and let that be the end of the tale. Indeed, it's a beautiful story that resides on the tongues of enthusiasts for equity and justice. It is rehearsed in classrooms and pulpits and barbershops all across this nation at this time of year. It reflects a yet to be accomplished triumph that many of us really are still in search of, holding out hope for, building for, beholden to the ideals of, holding our breath for, really, in a nation where justice sometimes feels elusive. Sometimes it feels out of reach. I know you've heard the story when you tell the children how we got over at some point. I hope that you will play that story, play that dream for them. Let them touch it. Let them feel the words leaping off of their mouths. I have a dream is important. I love that it's in our collective memory and that we remember it in this particular moment. But I submit to you that there is more to the story. I'm not stopping on this August 28th day to tell you about a man and a dream that he had. I'm actually more interested in telling you what's behind the dream, both literally and figuratively. For just a few moments, I want to talk to you about what it means to push the dream forward. In ancient Hebrew culture, the role of the prophet, the prophets had the job of keeping the ministry of imagination alive. Right. It was the prophets who were concerned with evoking a consciousness that could serve as the alternative to the dominant culture that was around them. It was a prophet that folks looked to insert moral language into public dialogue and literally make hope accessible so that we can materialize the possibility for different outcomes. We see that in Martin king. Martin King would often say, I've seen the power of God, transforming the fatigue of despair into the buoyancy of hope. I'm convinced that in the struggle for righteousness, the universe continually bends towards justice. The brilliance of a king was in his ability to take this familiar dream and to recast it for a particular time and purpose. But I'm here to tell you on this day that dreams do not exist in isolation. Who would and where would we be without Martin King Sr., right? And in Alberta, Christine Williams King, their King's father and his mother. Who would and where would we be without an Ella Jo Baker and her democratic philosophies of leadership? Where would we be, as I mentioned, without an Ida B. Wells and her prophetic fire? And then there was a Mahalia Jackson. Quite literally, the most powerful gospel force of the 20th century. I believe she was so in tune with the spirit of that moment that she transformed a speech. It was a familiar speech that Martin King had gave just weeks before in Detroit. She transformed that moment, that speech, into a watershed moment in history. According to Clarence Jones, who was Martin King's lawyer at the time, he helped them go over the speech. Mahalia Jackson was standing behind Martin. She would often say, when I meet the burden of the day, I sing a song that fits the condition. I believe that she sensed in this moment that something was missing when she said, tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream. It was Mahalia's obedience to the moment that catalyzed, that literally called, dare I say, compelled the dream to come forward. If I could zoom in on that particular moment for just a moment, she didn't say, Martin, tell them your dream. She said, tell them the dream. Now, for me, there's more than just semantics here. I believe that Sister Mahalia Jackson, she's teaching us that we are just vessels, that dreams were never inspired by anything that we've done, and they don't belong to us. Our Lord, our Savior, He trusts us with dreams, ideas, and visions. If I could borrow Mahalia's words for just a minute, I translate them to say, tell them about the thing, right, that God has given you. Tell them about the vision. Tell them about the plan. Tell them about the idea. Tell them about the blueprint. Tell them about the insight, the imagination, the images that God has given you to share. This type of dreaming, I believe, is what Robin Kelly might call freedom dreaming. Freedom dreaming. I'm glad that you asked. Freedom dreaming is a tool that literally invites people in to create the worlds we dream of by first visualizing the future that we want. And then second, determining the actions that will lead us there. Visualize the future that we want. Determine the actions needed to get us there. This type of dreaming, it literally compels witnesses to intentionally and to thoughtfully participate in what I call this project of world making. It actively calls on us to think about and to connect stories of Black, Indigenous, people of color. It calls on us to affirm identity across ability, gender, sexuality, age, stages of healing, socio-economic status. It calls on us to connect people and communities to create shared visions with one another. It's literally bent on acknowledging and harnessing our intrinsic power. You have got to have something that you believe in. Got to have something that you believe in. It calls on us to listen deeply and then to unlearn some of the harmful things that we've taken in. Are we willing to listen? Are we willing to unlearn some of the harmful ideologies and ideas that we've taken in? I love what Edwidge Danticott, the brilliant Haitian writer, calls on us to do in her powerful text, Create Dangerously, the immigrant artist at work. She says we should imagine otherwise. We should create dangerously, not just for pomp and circumstance, but for the opportunity of creating anew the world that we so desperately want. The process of creating art, she says, that tells the truth requires courage. It requires understanding and faith, knowing that these individuals, the artists that she refers to, often risked everything up to and including their lives so that we might have the opportunity, really, to remember who we are as people. It is because of their courage to create what was necessary for our survival that we have the opportunity to do the same. And so I say to you all at Rochester University, create dangerously, knowing in part that no matter how trivial sometimes the work may sometimes seem, that someone, someday, somewhere may risk their lives to experience the very thing that you are creating, that someone might risk their lives to read or engage your work. Create dangerously as if everything you are putting your hands to were a stand-in for a life, for a soul, for a future. We have seen this. We've seen this not only in history, but we have seen it across the scriptures. Esther, I believe, was a freedom dreamer when she went in to have an audience with the king. We saw it in Daniel. He was a dreamer when he wouldn't compromise. Moses was a freedom dreamer. David was a freedom dreamer when he went down into the valley of Allah. Tell them about the thing that I have given you. My question for each of you, each of us, is what are you dreaming about? And who needs to hear it? The walls of my bedroom were my first easel. Sandstone espresso, the color of less dangerous coffee. Neutral and watered down like the backdrop for photographs. A surface with no distinction would never have a story to tell. My brother and I, we couldn't bear the agony of untold adventures. So when life was only as tall as doorknobs, we left all the wisdom we could squeeze out of Crayola and hieroglyphics for archaeologists to examine. Mama didn't like this too much. Said this wasn't the place for that type of intellect. There would come a time when maturity would compel us to restore and revitalize the incivility of radical imagination, but I will never forget my father's words at the hearing of our mischievous acts. He said, if this is how they want to live, then let them do it. Perhaps he saw something in us that was buried in him, the same courage that allowed him to break the ocean in two and carry the weight of never returning. Ideas don't fit into rigid boundaries. Immigrants rarely do, so they raise poets to be the pencil for the silenced and paint on walls, because there was never room for them in books to become authors for the purpose of naming the murals we dismiss as graffiti, the genre of the voiceless. If riots are the language of the unheard, the bricks of my spirit are full of them. Cacophony and three-part harmony, crosses I didn't choose to bear, but for the sake of this gospel I wear. Our bodies are projects, portraits rehearsing the struggle for justice, noisy, disruptive, unruly, contentious adjectives we assign to things that misbehave, suspending the humanity of things that offend. This is what it looks like to be a problem. Art was never meant to hang in galleries. Flawed templates for cursory viewing, musing, and mindless movement along a carousel of controlled protest masterpieces lose their brilliance this way, this posturing, this turning down your rage to barely audible levels so that they will never hear the fireworks in your belly, the languish of pain, anger, and love. Our canvas isn't polite, it's political. Spilled acrylic paint in all the right places, part dialogue and revolution, rarely separating the two. Keep showing up, and when you do, show up big and loud, out of place and eloquent, like fevers that won't break. Soup and water won't rid this type of disease. Custodians can't scrub out what is rather resistant. Resting in the bosom of aerosol is a condition to scribble interruptions into advocacy, truancy, into truth-telling, vandalism, and to validation. You could spend a lifetime responding to the symbols and to the shapes given to you, or you can give them something to call you. Make sure your mural is incandescent and glows in the dark, made of the same materials as brown girls dreaming in the souls of black folk. Name it something powerful. Something soulful and urgent, convicting, the tongue with every syllable too complicated to utter thoughtlessly. Train them to say it correctly and repeat if necessary. You are worthy of that name as something defiant. Rebellions and protests share the same soul. No matter what nation or state you call home, give it a holy name. Our children will hear the voice we give to our prayers and remember to be proud of their bodies and this genius, no matter how wrong they are told they are. Make it sound like hip-hop. Literacy of recovery, rebirth with the soundtrack of resistance written on vinyl, arresting a world that co-opted your rhythm and blues. Return to our possession a license to move freely. Call it Umoja, Ujima, Ujamani Akumba, and every principle that reaffirms the beauty from which we ascend. Name it Jericho or Berlin with your voice as the trumpet. In arms, raised like trombones. Yes, walls may be insurmountable, but nothing is impenetrable. Unrighteous cornerstones will always fall in on themselves. Give it a fearless tone. One of warriors and war cries. Make it a resurrection song. For the names we will pull from the wreckage of oppression that will not stay nameless. Trayvon, Tamir, Eric, Sean, Rakaya, Yvette, Cynthia, Denise, Brianna, your names, your memory will be the rhythm in my breath. It'll be the paint on my hands. Our lives are murals with no name until we give it one. Tell them about the dream. Thank you all so much. Ashe.